Sharon Osbourne stood still as the hearse began to move, a single black rose clutched in her hand, her eyes locked on the casket carrying the love of her life. The noise of the crowd melted away. She stepped forward, laid the flower down gently, and pressed her hand to the wood, whispering something only he could understand. Behind her, their children stood in quiet grief, Kelly trembling, Jack holding her close, Aimee staring forward in silence, Louis with tears rolling down his cheeks. Then Sharon stepped back and raised her hand for one final wave, not to the cameras, not to the crowd, but to Ozzy. A soft, breaking goodbye, a thank you, a promise. As the hearse rolled out of sight, swallowed by the city that made them, her hand fell, and with it, the final note of their life together echoed into peace.
Very emotional. Obviously, been a Black Sabbath fan for a long time, watched the Osbournes on the TV.
Ozzy was an absolute legend. He is and Black Sabbath are the originators of heavy metal.
Just to show respect and, just be here for Ozzy and the family.
On July 22nd, 2025, John Michael Ozzy Osbourne, icon of heavy metal, beloved Birmingham son, and the indelible frontman of Black Sabbath, passed away peacefully at the age of 76. He was surrounded by his wife Sharon and their children in the comfort of their home. After years of health struggles, including his battle with Parkinson's disease, his passing marked the end of a seismic era in rock history. But in the days that followed, it became clear that death was not the end of Ozzy's presence. It was merely a transition into the realm of legend. Just weeks before his death, on July 5th, Ozzy had bid farewell to fans with a moving performance at Villa Park, Birmingham's iconic football stadium. The event, titled Back to the Beginning, was less a concert and more a living wake. Though frail and seated throughout, Ozzy delivered a powerful, emotional set with former Black Sabbath bandmates. Surrounded by tens of thousands and streamed to millions more, it was his final thunderous cry, a man saying goodbye not with a whisper, but with the wail of guitars and the roar of fans. That night, he looked every inch the Prince of Darkness, and yet, more than ever, the heart of Birmingham.
On July 30th, the city rose in collective reverence as the streets of Birmingham transformed into a living tribute. Thousands lined the roads in mourning and celebration as a Jaguar hearse carried Ozzy's casket through the neighborhoods and landmarks of his youth. From Lodge Road to Broad Street, the procession was slow, dignified, and deeply moving. Fans wore vintage Black Sabbath shirts, held signs, and raised their hands in the iconic devil horns. Despite the grief, there was a palpable sense of triumph in the air, of honoring a man who had survived fame, addiction, and expectation, and who had never stopped loving the city that made him. As the procession reached the Black Sabbath bridge, the crowd thickened. Flowers, photos, candles, and handwritten letters surrounded the commemorative bench where Ozzy had once sat with Sharon. The family stepped out here, pausing in the shadow of the statue that immortalized the band. Sharon, tearful but composed, was flanked by their children, Kelly, Jack, Aimee, and Louis, as she touched the flowers laid in tribute. Fans stood shoulder to shoulder, many crying openly, others singing softly. Someone began to chant, "Ozzy, Ozzy, Ozzy," and within seconds the chorus spread down the street. It was a chant of devotion, not desperation, like cheering a friend toward the light. Kelly Osbourne, recently engaged, appeared overcome with emotion as she hugged her family and waved to fans. There was something achingly full circle in it all. Just days earlier, she had celebrated a beginning. Now she was helping bury the man who had shaped her life so profoundly. For all his demons, Ozzy had always been a fiercely devoted father, a wild heart tethered by love. The procession paused again at Villa Park, a symbolic return to the stage where he'd said goodbye. People grew quiet here, reflective. Then from a distant speaker, the first notes of changes played, Ozzy's melancholic ballad with his daughter, prompting sobs across the crowd. Eventually the procession continued on to Broad Street where thousands more awaited. Some fans had camped out overnight to secure a view. Others had traveled from across the UK and even abroad. The send-off had grown beyond a funeral, it had become a pilgrimage. Music played, flags waved, and the sound of applause never fully stopped. It felt like Birmingham wasn't burying a man, they were launching him skyward. Later that day, a private family ceremony was held, quiet and intimate, but by then the public had already done what it needed to do. It had loved him out loud. The city that had given Ozzy his roots now gave him the ultimate send-off. In life, he had sung about madness and darkness. In death, he was carried by light and gratitude. Ozzy Osbourne may have started as the Prince of Darkness, but by the end, he was Birmingham's brightest star. As his hearse disappeared down the final road, fans did not fall silent. They cheered, they clapped, they shouted his name one last time, not in sorrow, but in celebration. It was a farewell worthy of a king, a man who never forgot where he came from, and whom his city would never forget. In the days that followed the procession, Birmingham pulsed with memory. The city didn't return to normal. How could it? Posters of Ozzy hung from pub windows, bus stops, record stores, radio stations replayed his classics on loop, and local musicians covered Sabbath songs in tiny venues across the city. Even school children, many too young to have seen Ozzy live, walked home with Crazy Train playing through their headphones, learning through music what their parents and grandparents had lived through.
Local newspapers dedicated entire issues to his life and legacy. One paper featured a black and white photo of a young Ozzy, just 19 years old, standing outside Aston's crumbling row houses. The headline read simply, "He took Birmingham to the world." And he had. Long before the city's music scene became a point of pride, long before Birmingham could boast about its cultural exports, there was Ozzy, a factory worker's son who screamed his way out of poverty and into the collective soul of a generation. But Ozzy's gift was never just the music. It was the myth. The permission he gave people to be weird, wild, broken, and still beautiful. He had been a walking contradiction his whole life, tortured but loving, outrageous yet deeply vulnerable, shocking but unmistakably sincere. He had made mistakes, many of them public, yet never pretended to be anything but himself. And in that messy honesty, people found comfort. They saw themselves. His family too became part of that myth. Sharon Osbourne, often painted as the iron woman behind the madness, was now seen as a partner in one of rock's greatest love stories. Their marriage had survived infidelities, near-death experiences, public scandals, and the unforgiving spotlight of reality television. In the end, they had made it through, not by pretending to be perfect, but by always coming back to one another. Her final goodbye at the Black Sabbath Bridge was not a farewell from a widow, but from a soulmate, one who had ridden every wave with him. The city of Birmingham announced plans to expand Ozzy's legacy into permanent form. Murals were commissioned, a scholarship for working-class musicians was announced in his name, a life-size bronze statue was proposed to stand not far from the Black Sabbath bench. Fans sent letters to City Hall asking that a street be renamed after him. He belongs to all of us now, one letter read, but he was ours first. And in a way that summed up what made the loss so intimate, Ozzy Osbourne had been a global icon, an MTV star, a Grammy winner, a household name, but he had never truly left Birmingham. Fame didn't change his voice, his laugh, or his blunt honesty. No matter how many stages he lit on fire around the world, he always brought a bit of Aston with him. And when he came back, it wasn't for press, it was because this was home. These were his people. In living rooms across the world, families rewatched old concert footage and episodes of the Osbournes. Children heard Paranoid and War Pigs for the first time. Teenagers rediscovered the albums buried in their parents' collections. And at night, in cities far from Birmingham, candles burned in front of old record players and bedroom altars, symbols of a farewell that reached across oceans. But in Birmingham, something deeper lingered. It was in the pubs where Ozzy once sang for beer money, in the concrete underpasses where he scribbled lyrics as a boy, in the heavy air of a working-class city that had seen one of its own rise to myth. People spoke of him with pride, with mischief, with tenderness. Some mourned like they'd lost a friend, others celebrated like they'd witnessed a miracle. And maybe both were true, for Ozzy didn't just die. He ascended into something timeless, beyond stage and screen, beyond controversy or costume. He became a piece of the culture that raised him, a voice that would never fully fade. Somewhere on some late-night radio wave, he was still howling. Somewhere, a new kid from Birmingham was picking up a guitar because of him. And somewhere else, beyond the veil, past the madness, beyond the pain, Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, was finally at peace. And the city that made him, it was still singing. If you're new to this channel, then be sure to subscribe to What's News for the latest celebrity news around the globe.